As many of you know and you heard earlier, Kenna Ranitsky and I recently returned from our congregation's trip to Spain with 27 other members of our congregation. It was a journey that took us deep into the heart of Jewish history, into places where Jewish life once flourished. Can you hear me? Okay. And where its echoes still linger. The story of Jewish Spain is a story of brilliance. It's a story of resilience and unimaginable loss. Today I want to reflect on that journey and to explore what it teaches us about who we are and how we can shape our future. Now, the Jewish presence in Spain spans over 1,400 years, maybe even longer. Some historians traced Jewish migration to the Iberian Peninsula as far back as the Second Temple period, in the 1st century BCE. By the time of the Roman Empire, Jewish communities were absolutely thriving, integrated into the economy and to the culture of Roman Spain. Emperor Hadrian, who was actually born in Sevilla, Spain, brutally crushed the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135 of the Common Era and expelled Jews from Jerusalem. And many of those Jews who were expelled from Jerusalem were scattered across the Roman Empire, and Spain became home to many of the displaced Jewish families from Israel. And two major centers of Jewish life arose, one in Babylonia, or what is today modern Iraq and Baghdad, and the other in Spain. And over centuries, Jewish life grew, weathering waves of persecution and opportunity until the arrival of the Muslim conquest in the early 8th century brought a new chapter. With Muslim rule, particularly under the Umayyad Caliphate in Cordoba, Jewish communities experienced an unprecedented flourishing. And this era was known, in my terrible Spanish, as the convivencia, or the coexistence. It was not just about tolerance, it was about collaboration. Jewish, Muslim, and Christian scholars worked together, get that, exchanging ideas in philosophy, in medicine, astronomy, and poetry. Cordoba has an amazing 2-in-1 mosque and cathedral. That's really true. It's 2-in-1, a mosque and a cathedral in one huge space. And it is there where scholars would sit in front of different pillars and lecture about art and math and science and philosophy and religion. And it was in Cordoba where Moses Maimonides, or Rambam, as we know him, as one of the greatest rabbis, if not the greatest rabbi of Jewish history, emerged as Judaism's greatest thinker, a philosopher, a physician, a Torah scholar. By the time he was my age, he was a rabbi, a doctor, and a lawyer. And I could have done it. I want you to know. But my Netflix has a lot of good television, which prevented me from really reaching my full potential. I'm sorry, Mom. But Maimonides, he demonstrated that science and philosophy and religion could coexist as partners in understanding God. And Cordoba's openness, its rich history, made such groundbreaking work possible. In Lucena, the city of the Jews, Rabbi Isaac Alfasi, or the Rif, codified Jewish law, making Talmudic teachings accessible for everyday life. And Lucena was an intellectual and spiritual haven, a city where Jewish legal thought flourished and influenced Jewish practice for centuries. In Granada, Judah Halevi, one of Judaism's most beloved leaders and poets, poured his soul into verses that longed for Zion and captured the beauty of Jewish spirituality. His poetry transcended time, reminding us that faith is both intellectual and deeply emotional. And in Girona, Nachmanides, not to be confused with Maimonides or Ramban explored Jewish mysticism. He uncovered hidden layers of the Torah through Kabbalah. And as a community leader and defender of Judaism in public debates, Ramban embodied resilience, helping Girona's Jews navigate the complexities of faith and survival. This was a golden age. And the golden age teaches us that Jewish life thrives in connection where diverse ideas flow and faith engages with the broader world around it. But golden ages are fragile, and if not carefully safeguarded. And in the 12th century, the cracks began to show. The arrival of the Almohads, a fanatically strict Muslim sect from North Africa, shattered the golden age. They burned books, imposed forced conversions. They exiled Jews who refused to abandon their faith. And communities that had flourished for generations, for nearly 1,000 years, were displaced, and figures like Maimonides fled, carrying fragments of their legacy with them. As Muslim power declined, the Christian Reconquista advanced. And what began as a military campaign to reclaim territory became a mission to create a unified Catholic Spain. The Catholic Church amplified anti-Jewish sentiment, portraying Jews as heretics and threats to Christian society. And laws that were created were segregated Jews, restricted our education, and barred Jews from professions. The openness of the Golden Age gave way to fear and exclusion and fanaticism. And the final blow came in 1492 with the Alhambra Decree. You might have thought that it was about Columbus sailing the ocean blue. But it was also the year that Ferdinand and Isabella issued an ultimatum: convert to Christianity or leave Spain. And this decree forced hundreds of thousands of Jews to abandon their homes, synagogues, and livelihoods. Families who had lived in Spain for over 1,000 years faced exile with little more than the clothes on their backs, carrying fragments of their faiths into new lands. And for those who stayed, and for those who converted, known as conversos, or new Christians, life became a precarious balancing act. Because conversion did not bring peace. The Inquisition, established to root out heresy, turned its relentless gaze on the conversos, accusing them of secretly practicing Judaism, a crime that was unacceptable, because the Inquisition's tactics were brutal. Families were interrogated, tortured, and executed for the faintest sign of Jewish observance: a candle lit on a Friday night, a found book of hidden scriptures, a whispered Hebrew prayer, or the baking of unleavened bread in the spring. Entire communities lived in fear, hiding their faith behind closed doors and passing down fragments of Jewish tradition and whispers and secrecy. But the secrecy came with a cost, because over generations, hidden practices eroded. Children of conversos grew up without the full depth of Jewish life, and Judaism as a living tradition all but disappeared in Spain by the late 18th century. What began as a strategy for survival ultimately led to the decimation of Jewish identity in the region. Just to put it into perspective, 1492 is when the Inquisition fully started. But the last conversos sentenced to death by the Inquisition were in the 1730s. And by the end of the 18th century, Spain was devoid of openly practicing Jews, leaving behind fragments and gravestones and repurposed synagogues and names altered to hide their Jewish origins. By 1834, Spain ended the Inquisition, and there was no sign of any Jews on the Iberian Peninsula or anywhere where Spain and its empire went. The Inquisition was not just an attack on individuals, it was an attempt to erase a culture. It sought to destroy the legacy of Jewish Spain and replace it with silence. But as Jews, we know that silence is never the final word. Memory is our act of defiance. So we went on a journey of memory. Walking through Spain today, the loss and the destruction of Jewish life was absolutely palpable. In Seville, the Jewish quarter is nearly erased, with only a single grave hidden beneath and within a parking garage. In Granada, The Jewish quarter is almost invisible, marked only by a statue and a few street names. In Lucena, archaeologists uncovered a cemetery with 300 unmarked graves, silent witnesses to the vibrant community that once thrived there. In Cordoba, a synagogue that Maimonides grew up in stands worn and hollow with partial inscriptions and its prayers long faded. And there's a statue to Maimonides, the model of which was a local person because there were no Jews in Spain with which to model Maimonides' statue. And in Toledo, a synagogue that was repurposed as a church now bears Hebrew inscriptions around the top of the building with a cross at the center above where the bema and ark once stood, a stark reminder of transformation and loss. And in Barcelona, the gravestones of Jewish cemetery were used to construct the facades of Christian buildings. Spain is a country with remnants of an amazing Jewish past, persecuted and destroyed by the Catholic Church and by Muslim fanatics who were defending, quote unquote, the faith. Yet as haunting as these places are, they also remind us of the resilience of the Jewish people. Memory is not passive, it is an act of preservation. To remember these communities is to carry them forward, ensuring that their light is not extinguished. Our journey ended in Madrid, where we encountered a vibrant community at Congregation Or Hadash. And Or Hadash means a new light. A new light. It's a perfect name for a congregation in Spain. Because here Jewish life is being rebuilt not as a relic of the past, but as a living, breathing tradition. Every Shabbat candle, every holiday gathering, every child's laughter is an act of defiance and an act of hope. The members of Or Hadash are doing something extraordinary. They're replanting Jewish life in a region that has been absent of Jewish life for centuries. And their work is challenging, but it reminds us that rebuilding is in fact possible. The story of Jewish Spain is not only about loss, it is about resilience, the courage to rebuild, and the audacity to hope. It is about carrying memory forward not as a weight, but as a source of strength and purpose. The Sephardic Jews who were exiled from Spain planted their traditions in new lands, including here in the United States. We would not be here in the United States if it wasn't for the Inquisition, ensuring that the brilliance of Jewish Spain would live on. And today, in places like Congregation Or Hadash, we see the extraordinary effort to replant Jewish life in a land that was once barren of all Judaism. So what does this story mean for us? What lessons do we carry from Spain as we face the challenges of today? I came away with at least two essential truths this past week. That the fragility of Jewish existence and the power of Jewish resilience. I know that everyone is concerned about rising anti-Semitism. I am pretty concerned too. I don't want to downplay the issues. And at the same time, I want to be clear that we're not living in pre-Inquisition Spain. That's pretty clear to me. We are not facing the same kinds of existential threats that our ancestors endured. And the Jewish community and the country of Israel make for a very different reality. But the history of Spain absolutely should remind us that complacency is really dangerous. Because enlightened periods of discovery, enlightened periods of creativity are fragile. And the seeds of extremism, if left unchecked, can grow into something devastating. Book burnings and bannings, forced expulsions of minority groups, attacks on academics, forcing religious choices on others, demeaning and scapegoating minority groups. These are all signs of extremism that we need to watch, that we need to confront head on, because each step is a slippery slope, and before we know it, we could absolutely tumble towards a terrible end. So Spain's history calls us to vigilance, not just against the external threats, but also the internal forces of fear and disconnection. And at the same time, Spain also offers a model of what we need to hold on to. Because during the golden age of Jewish life, it thrived not in isolation, but in connection with each other, with the broader world, and with the wisdom of our traditions. And that connection, it gave rise not only to courage, but most importantly to creativity in an unshakable sense of purpose. We must plant the same seeds today with audacity and with hope. Jews have so much more autonomy and power than we once did. And in a world increasingly marked by rising hate, we are called to respond with courage, planting the seeds of strength to stand firm against prejudice and intolerance. In moments of isolation, we must nurture connection, weaving bonds that remind us that we are never truly alone. When despair threatens to overwhelm us, it is resilience that we must cultivate, drawing on our history of faith and to endure and rebuild. Against the pull of apathy, we are challenged to act, to engage with purpose and determination. And in times of uncertainty, it is hope that must guide us, planting the seeds of possibility that inspire us to create a future filled with light and filled with possibility. The story of Spain teaches us that memory is not about looking back, but it is about building forward. It is about ensuring that the losses of the past are not repeated and that the gifts that we have inherited are passed on, stronger, deeper, and more vibrant. Our history calls out to us to engage with our Jewish identity, to embrace our traditions, and to act with urgency and purpose. Let us carry forward the legacy of Jewish Spain, not as some distant memory, but as a living, breathing inspiration to honor what has been and to create what must be. May we confront extremism in all of its destructive forms with unwavering resolve, standing against hatred, fear, and division, and committing ourselves to the values of compassion and justice and the sanctity of every human life. May we learn from the resilience of the Sephardic Jews who carried their light across the world. May we draw strength from the courage of communities like Or Hadash, who are replanting what was lost. And may we have the audacity to plant our own seeds with hope, with faith, and with the knowledge that the future depends on what we choose to nurture today. Let us carry this charge with purpose to honor our past, to act in the present, and to build a future that endures. Shabbat Shalom.